over at BangTheBook.com. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Lots of great stuff going on over there right now, including, but not limited to, Kyle Hunter's daily college basketball picks piece, Parker Michaels' daily NHL picks, NBA coverage from Alan Moody and Admir Algic, more college basketball coverage from Alan Moody, Jonathan Willis, and Corey Pabst. We've got soccer previews going up on the regular. Big Ten Watto's tennis stuff doing fantastic this year from an outright winner's standpoint. Golf, NASCAR. We'll get a UFC 235 preview today from Christian Pina. Then, of course, my Major League Baseball stuff rolling out next week, making some final edits and stuff like that with those. So lots of good things going on over at BangTheBook.com right now. And again, we are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook, up to $500. 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino, up to $500. At BetDSI, it's only a game until you bet it. Two guests on the program here today. We start things off with professional handicapper Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. Brad, how's it going today, man?
Man, it's going well. How you doing on this fine Thursday morning?
Doing well, buddy. Appreciate the time as always here, sir. Last day of February, the month of madness begins tomorrow, so I know we're all very excited about that. March Madness a little bit later here this year, so keep that in mind for all of our listeners out there. But you and I, it's kind of our thing. It's sort of what we do here on the show, chat a little bit of college football on every segment that we possibly can, and I know some Heisman odds came out. We'll talk about those in a second, but, man, spring practices, even some spring games coming up here very, very soon.
Yeah, actually, the first one's on tonight on the Pac-12 network, Arizona State. I was trying to make plans, my schedule to drive down and actually watch it in person, but I'll just have to settle for watching it on the Pac-12 network. So I'm excited about that. Obviously, some good combine news today about Kyler Murray. Look, I love hoops. I love March Madness, but near and dear to my heart is, on the gridiron. So a lot of football action, but also a lot of basketball action.
Well, in Arizona State, it's actually, I mean, the way that this happened to work out is pretty good for us from a talking point, standpoint here on the show that, second-year head coach in Herm Edwards, team that was much better last year than I think any of us thought, especially not knowing what Herm Edwards is going to bring to the table. Nice to get a second-year guy that you can see right out of the gate and sort of see how that program is evolving.
Yeah, especially a team that major unknown at quarterback spot. I believe they took 3 or 4 quarterback recruits in this cycle, and almost all of them are on campus, including very highly regarded 4-star players. So it'll be interesting to see who replaces Manny Wilkins. You get a good first look today. That's good in that regard. Obviously, they're going to miss their wide receiver, Arizona State, and N'Keal Harry, borderline first-round type of draft pick. But a lot of guys are back, and, defensively, especially on that side of the ball. Danny Gonzalez did a good job last year, coming over from San Diego State. Very experienced defense coming back. That's where I think they'll make their hay again this year on the defense side of the ball as they settle in the quarterback spot. Arizona State just played a heck of a lot of close games last year. I think they played 9 games that were decided by 7 points or less. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens again this year. Without an experienced quarterback, I don't think they make too big of a move. In my early power ratings, I have Arizona State pretty much about as good as they were a year ago. I got them, for right around number 39th in the country. Again, I think the offense takes a step back, but the defense takes a step forward. We'll get a good look tonight, though.
So I guess last thing I'll ask about here, for people that may be a little bit football starved, that aren't big fans of the AAF and the product that's been here so far, what are you looking for in these spring games from a handicapping standpoint? I mean, what sort of are you just scouting the talent that's there, or are you looking for maybe some telltale signs of what we can expect?
I'm scouting the talent. I'm also, you can't get everything from one single spring game, but what you can do, keep in mind the announcers. A lot of times have been, there's been a pull behind the curtain. A lot of times they've been to the practices that might be closed to most of the media. So, the announcers will give you, in a 2-hour type of game, you can basically get your cliff notes on what's been going on during the spring. Who's been a surprise player, who's emerged, maybe even who's disappointed, what position groups surprised, what position groups disappointed. Then I can do it with the eye test on the field. So it's mainly specific player specific, but for me, it's kind of with 130 teams, it's tough to, dive into each and every one of them when it comes to reading every single spring day practice, especially when I'm actively handicapping college hoops. So getting a 2-hour Cliff Notes version on that team and actually watching them on the field, look, just because, a third-string running back runs for 100 yards in the spring game doesn't mean that I automatically think he's going to be an All-American. I don't get any of that. But what I am looking at to see, specific position groups and players, that especially guys that have to do the replacing. There's been some production loss. There's been a key player at a position group or a key starter that's lost. I always want to see who's the next guy up, the next man up in that rotation. So that's what I kind of isolate in on when it comes to spring games.
All right, so as we continue talking college football here, Heisman Trophy odds came out at the Westgate Superbook here this week. I believe it was a couple of days ago. The offshore marketplace has been open for a little while, so we've gotten some sort of idea here on what to expect from a Heisman standpoint. Before we look specifically at one of the bets that you made, Tua Tagovailoa 5-2 favorite for the opening numbers, at the Superbook. Trevor Lawrence 3-1, Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, Adrian Martinez, all 6-1. Hurts, of course, transferring to Oklahoma. Fields to Ohio State. Martinez still at Nebraska. And then Jonathan Taylor, 15-1 at Wisconsin. Interesting there with Alex Hornibrook now in the transfer portal. Looks like he'll be the focal point of the Wisconsin offense once again. But you had some interesting notes on your Twitter handle, on your Twitter page, at Brad Powers and the number 7, about the Heisman and how people should approach the list of guys that are out there.
Yeah, a little Heisman betting 101. I think, you can make some money betting the Heisman. Now, let me first say this. With this year, I'm going to be surprised if it isn't Tua or Trevor Lawrence. So I'm not going in, betting a lot of these long shots and putting a lot of money up, because I do think those two, Tua and Trevor Lawrence, are the clear-cut favorites. They're priced that way. I'll actually probably look to bet both of those guys if I can get a 5 or 6-1 at some random book here in town later in the summer. I don't expect their odds to move too much, therefore I haven't bet either one of those guys. I think total ripoffs. Adrian Martinez at 6-1, a total ripoff. A guy that I thought I could get some value with at 40 or 50-1. It's not. He's way overpriced in the marketplace, quarterback for Nebraska. But generally speaking, here's how I handle betting the Heisman, and I've had success. I had a Kyler Murray ticket that I bet, I believe, last February or at least 6, 7, 8 months prior. It's okay to bet long shots. 8 of the last 10 winners have been 20-1 or greater in the preseason. The whole Heisman dynamic shifted here recently. 20 years ago, it was more of a career award than it was best season. Now it's kind of, we live in a flavor of the month society, so it's okay that the long shots have routinely cashed outside of Baker Mayfield and Marcus Mariota here. Everyone's pretty much come from I wouldn't say total unknowns, but let's face it, guys like Johnny Manziel wasn't even listed, Jameis Winston wasn't even listed. It's a Flavor of the Month award, and speaking of what the award is about, it's a quarterback award. 16 of the last 19 guys have been quarterbacks. Only a couple of Alabama running backs and Reggie Bush have been the only non-quarterbacks to win the award this century. So if you're going to be betting on one of these long shots, it better be a quarterback. And got to play on a good team. Last 19 Heisman winners, so we're going again this century since the year 2000. Average regular season wins for the team he plays on, 10.9. So basically an 11-1 team. Sure, we've had your Tebows and your Lamar Jacksons that have been on 9-3 teams, but more often than not, we're talking a national title contending team. So long shot, quarterback, plays on a great team. That's how I'm going to handle betting the Heisman, and not only this year, but also moving forward.
All right, so I know that there's one guy that you did take here so far, and one of those guys that's, I would say, in the mid-range. I wouldn't call him a long shot necessarily, but sort of in that mid-range price. I really like this one. I think of all the guys on the board right now, you did isolate the one that probably stands out the most to me.
Well, I bet two. The first one that I put up yesterday was Jake Fromm, 40-1. Obviously he's 20-1 or greater odds, so kind of a long shot. but you're right, more mid-range. It's not like he's a 100-1 type of guy. He's a quarterback, and he plays on a really good team. I'm really high on Georgia. I got them number 3 preseason power rating for me. I think they'll be favored in all 12 of their games. He doesn't get enough credit. He's been extremely efficient, top 10 in the country in efficiency each of his 2 years as a starting quarterback. I get it, he's not going to put up many rushing numbers, but I'll tell you this, I'm not expecting him to win it, but if he leads Georgia to a 12-0 regular season, I think if it's 3 years running with the kind of stats he puts up year after year, 65+% completion percentage, he doesn't throw interceptions. And here's a little nugget here. Justin Fields, who's 6-1 at Ohio State, couldn't beat out Jake Fromm at Georgia. He couldn't do it. So I got a guy that couldn't beat out Jake Fromm getting priced at 6-1. I got Jake Fromm at 40-1. And the last couple of years, all season long, Jake Fromm's been in that 10-1 to 15-1 range as far as the Heisman goes. So here's one that, do I expect him to win it? No. But he's 40-1, and I think he should probably be priced half that. I think he'd probably be in the 20-1 range. So therefore, I bet Jake Fromm 40-1 ticket that I think should be priced at 20-1.
Yeah, and Jake Fromm, looking at the offshore market, I see BetOnline has these numbers up. He's only 12-1 there. So great equity on that bet for Brad Powers. You said you bet another one. Who else did you take a shot on?
I bet Sam Ehlinger, Texas. Now, I put in my tweet, and I post my tickets on my Twitter account, all these stuff I bet when it comes to off-season college football. You just follow me on Twitter if you want to see it. Generally speaking, I think Texas is going to be overrated this year. I mean, they're getting priced right now in the futures market. I think number 7 in the country. If you do an average of all the futures market, I don't have Texas as a top 10 team. In fact, I think I got them even out borderline outside my top 20 at this point. But if Texas is going to live up to this lofty preseason height, it's going to be because of Sam Ehlinger. I love his game. There's a guy that ran for 16 rushing touchdowns a year ago, 65% completion percentage, 25 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, set the Big 12 record for most consecutive passes without an interception. I love the kid. He represents everything that college football should be about. Big win over Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Another kid that's being priced at 40-1, and I think his true odds are probably in the 25-1 range. I kind of like Sam Ehlinger 40-1. And if Texas is going to live up to the hype, it's going to be because of him, and therefore I think there'll be some value there. Give me Sam Ehlinger 40-1.
I want to ask you real quickly here about one other 40-1 guy. He's got a new offensive coordinator in Graham Harrell. I wonder what his price would have been if Cliff Kingsbury would have stayed at USC. But JT Daniels at 40-1, I think that's a guy that, not to say that I like him necessarily, and obviously you don't like him that much either, otherwise you would have played him. That's a guy I feel like people are going to sort of flock to a little bit here, expecting Harrell to turn that Trojans offense around. What do you think about him as of now?
Oh, I generally speaking, I like him. I like a few others. Justin Herbert at 30-1 is not too bad. And also JT Daniels right around 40-1. Kellen Mond at Texas A&M 50-1. But in almost all 3 cases, why I didn't bet him? One of the major rules when it comes to betting the Heisman, you got to be on a really good team more often, a majority of the time, 10, 11 win, 12 win type of team. SC, look at their schedule. It's brutal. Fresno State, Stanford, at BYU, Utah, at Washington, at Notre Dame. JT Daniels can play very well, and they could be a 3-3 team midway through the season, and they might have a coach that obviously is coming into the season on the hot seat, and any type of misfortune early on with SC, and it could be some trouble there in the land of La La Land there in L.A. So that's my concern with JT Daniels, but I agree with you. He's got a lot of playmakers on the outside that he's developed a good rapport with, especially guys that were freshman wide receivers a year ago. So I like the talent level there. I just don't like the schedule. I thought Oregon was a disappointment last year at 8-4. They had a cupcake schedule. This year's schedule is much tougher, starting with the opening game against Auburn, which I think they'll be a dog in. And instead of playing Stanford and Washington at home, the 2 big rivals in the North Division, both of those games are on the road. So that has a concern for me. Justin Herbert, And I think Kellen Mond at Texas A&M, who's in that price range, I think if you look at the Aggies' schedule, it might be the toughest in the country, starting non-conference at Clemson. They obviously play Alabama, and I think they also pull Georgia or one of the other main teams from the East. So a very tough schedule for Texas A&M, and that has me kind of laying off on a couple of those other mid-range guys.
All right, good to talk some college football here. We'll see if we find spots to do it throughout the month of March. It may be the only time with conference tournaments and March Madness you and I don't find a way to talk college football, but certainly good to do it here at this time of the year. All right, so I wanted to ask you about a couple of listener questions I got on Monday. And, you are a guy that predominantly bets college football, the NFL, and college basketball. You'll do NBA come playoff time, but had a listener question about bankroll management, and in particular, using the same unit size across all sports. So what does Brad Powers do in terms of his bankroll across different sports?
That's a very excellent question. I bet more games come college basketball just because you have more, obviously more of a selection to choose from. So I bet more games when it comes to college hoops. But my size is a little bit lower than what it would be a typical college football or NFL bet. So I think it's a good question in that I keep it, obviously my bankroll management, regardless of the sport, I keep it consistent as far as the unit size. Of course, I might bet a little bit more on one game than I would another, but more routinely, I've gotten to the point where, each bet's, close as far as unit size goes. I mean, there might be something if I consider it to be a strongest play of the week. Sure, why not? I'll have extra money on it, but generally speaking, I'll throw out just general numbers here. Maybe I'm betting $500 a game when it comes to college hoops. Even though I'm betting more games, that's my typical unit size. Maybe I'll step out once a week and bet a dime. Keep in mind, your limits are a little bit lower when it comes to college basketball. On totals, they're going to limit you to a dime or two. And you'll get questioned. It'll go up to approval when it comes to, betting college basketball total sides. You can get down 2 dimes, probably no problem, maybe even up to 5 dimes. College football, I'm a little bit more aggressive. My unit sizes as far as the average bets are probably double college basketball as far as those go, and the same goes for the NFL. But again, I'm betting a little bit less games than I am college basketball. So I think my overall bankroll is about the same for both, but just I'm betting more college basketball. Therefore, my unit size is probably half the size it is when it comes to the NFL and college football.
So for college football, you're out there grabbing openers on Sundays, and Caesar's now leading the market with that. So at least you still have a good out in that regard, since the Win not doing it anymore. So are those Sunday bets the same for you as a Thursday or a Friday bet from a unit size standpoint?
Oh, man, that's a good question. I know the limits go higher on Thursday, but, I can really predict the market and where it'll go, and some of my best numbers are those openers on Sunday. A lot of times whatever they can allow me to get down, whether it be a dime or two there on those Sunday openers, a lot of times because I'm extremely confident that I can get the best of the numbers, some cases by 2 or 3 points. And those are some of my bigger bets. Look, some people might be surprised by that, but I'm not a guy that's betting 10, 20,000 a game. I'm just not. I hope to be there someday, but Brad Power, he does drive a brand new pickup truck, and he's got a nice apartment, but he doesn't have a mansion and a yacht. He's not making millions of dollars a year.
Well, a yacht doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense in Las Vegas anyway, so I think you're okay having a nice big truck there. But, as you mentioned, you feel like you're very good at getting out in front of the market, and that's actually a good segue into the second question I wanted to talk about with you, because I got a really fascinating listener question using just a rough example here, saying that if you get -4 and the line goes up to -8, people call it value. But isn't the value using that additional equity to either look to middle or maybe, partial hedge or something like that? So what does Brad Powers do in that situation where, let's say you get a good number early in the week, maybe cross a key number or something like that? Are you just taking that ticket that should win and being happy with that? Or are you looking to use the additional value to create some more profit margin?
Another excellent question. You're right. And we're talking football here, right? 4 to 8 in football?
Well, for your example, we'll say football, yeah.
Okay. I'm probably less likely. I'll hedge a little bit depending on the bet. A little bit, though. We're not, I'm not saying I have a $1,000 bet at -4 and then I come back with 1,000 and +8. That's negative EV. You got to take your positive. You're 4 points ahead of the market. It's tough enough to win that. I crushed, when it came to South Point, I think I made like $15,000 worth of bets. South Point, I beat the closing line by 4 points, and I still barely finished above 50%. So when you're trying to middle, even if you crush the closing line, doesn't always on a year-to-year basis, if you're only talking 15 to 20 games that you bet, even then, it's tough winning. So I didn't hedge back too often. I did some that moved like a touchdown, but I can tell you the games that moved 3-4 points, I didn't bother hedging back. I felt pretty comfortable that I was ahead of the market. And again, even with being ahead of the market, I was barely above 50%. I chalked that up as a bad year. I think more often than not, I'm going to hit 55 or better on those big line moves as far as percent goes. I don't hedge back. But believe it or not, if you're talking a 4-point move in hoops, and keep in mind, like NBA, a key number can be 7 because of late game fouling. I'm more adept at hedging back if we're talking a 4-point move in hoops. I'll probably hedge back on a lot of those because, especially this time of year when the numbers are sharp, much more than what they were in November and December, I think your chances of catching a middle are much more greater when it comes to hoops than it would be football.
Well, and another thing that we've talked about here on the show that, the best indicator of future success is closing line value, is consistently beating the number. And there is equity in being happy with the 4 points of closing line value that you got, because obviously it's a sign that your numbers and your process, are in a good position. And I think that that's something that's important too, is that, you maybe want to get greedy and maybe want to maximize your profit potential. But at the same time, if you're getting 4 points of line value on a team, or 2 or 3 points of line value consistently on a team, up to maybe 4 points, it's pretty clear that you've got some equity in that team right now relative to the market. And that's something to capitalize on as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, more often than not, the only time I really hedge, if it's a time significant move, then I'll do it. And really more often than not, the only time I'll hedge is if, say the number, all right, let's use the 4 to 8 number. I really liked it at 4. Now, if at 8 I like the other team and I would, make a decent-sized bet at +8, then why the heck? If I'm already liking the team at +8, I already got a pretty good position, then of course I'll do it. I'm just not going to do it to try to find a middle just for the hell of it. If I think, I bet the number at 4, I thought it should have been, closer to 7. Of course, we're talking a key number there, and maybe I'll hedge back a little bit at 8. But if I start to like the team at the 8 size, then of course, well, why the heck not when I do it? But I'm just not going to do it. I don't blindly bet them just to hedge out and try to find a middle. I just don't do it. I would say 20% of the time I'll hedge back, and more often than not, only if I like the team at that number specifically, not because I'm just trying to find a middle.
Right, and to say that in a different way, essentially you're looking at it as 2 independent bets where you do have the opportunity at a middle, but, you took -4 for a reason. If you didn't have -4, would you make that bet at +8? And if the answer is no, then that's when you start to factor in, what are the chances I have of getting this middle? If the answer is yes, then the middle is just a bonus. And, what's really interesting about this and why I'm happy to talk about this with the different handicappers I have throughout the show is that, Brad, I've known you for probably 5 or 6 years now at this point in time. 3 years ago, this isn't a discussion that you and I are having. But your evolution from a handicapper to a bettor is the reason why you have to think about these things and why you're able to confidently, have a discussion like this. And that's something that I hope all of our listeners can achieve as well as they transition more from looking at this as breaking down games to looking at this as how you make money.
Good point. Because I mean, there's a big time difference when it comes to handicapping and betting, and obviously every half point matters when it comes to betting. And you're exactly right. If there's one area where I've really grown in the last 4 or 5 years, it's the more of the betting aspect. I still have my roots as a handicapper, always going to be that, specifically in the college sports as an originator and stuff. But, the betting aspect is where I've grown in leaps and bounds. And I'm not afraid to admit it. I was probably, when it came to betting, I was square 3-4 years ago. And I still have a hell of a lot to learn here. I don't have all the answers, but to be perfectly frank, I couldn't have said it any better the way you broke it down just now, as far as, when to take 4 and 8 and isolating them as two individual bets independently from one another. That's exactly how I treat it more often than not.
Well, and another corollary point to this, and again, I hope our listeners get to this point, and I know this is a point that you're getting to as well. As your bankroll increases, that's when these decisions also increase in importance. If you've got a lower bankroll, you want to handicap and you want to get that line value. If you've got a bigger bankroll, there's some more incentive for you. You're going to have a higher risk profile to go out there and try to do things like this with middling, with partial hedging, stuff like that. So, again, I hope that this is a point that all of our listeners can get to, and obviously I hope it's a point that you continue getting towards as you reach those bankroll sizes that you want to get to.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, if I had a huge bankroll, to me with my bankroll, I just want to beat the number and have some wins and, kind of supplementary income for me. I mean, it's a lot of supplementary income. I mean, it'd be a job for most people out there. But, if I had $1 million bankroll, no question, I would, obviously I would be betting a lot more. Not necessarily increasing my betting sizes, but, I'd be taking a lot more positions when it came to, if I beat the number, then of course I would be taking it back more often, not specifically in basketball compared to hoops, but no doubt about it. Another good point on your behalf.
Love questions like this. Again, I'll do another edition of the Monday Mailbag here coming up after the weekend. So at Skating Tripods on Twitter or Adam at BangTheBook.com. And I'll continue to do what I do here with the Monday Mailbag, where I answer your questions. And then, the questions that I think, our other guests, will benefit from answering as well. I'll carry those throughout the week. But Brad, last point as we transition over to the college basketball side here specifically, Senior Day. A lot of people have a lot of takes and a lot of thoughts on Senior Day. Lots of small and mid-major conferences here with Senior Day this weekend. Lots of the bigger conferences next week and on into the weekend. So what are your thoughts on Senior Day? How do you approach it?
All right, so I'm going to, pull behind the curtain here and, bear with me for those listening as far as it's kind of a derivative when it comes to Senior Day. But here's what I'm specifically looking for to take advantage. A lot of times, and it might only result in a few plays a week when it comes to Senior Day, but I'm looking to fade a big favorite that has a lot of seniors on Senior Day. And to get real specific, I'd like to fade that big favorite at home in the first half. And here's my reasons why. Number one, Senior Day, very emotional. So if you have multiple seniors, you're dealing with emotions. Your parents or your guardians are there hopefully with you, and it's a celebration. And what often happens is it's very emotional for those players, so it takes them, whether it be the first TV timeout, the first 4 minutes, or the first 8 minutes, to kind of overcome some of those emotions, because this is happening, and within 5 minutes you're playing the game. So oftentimes I find that big home favorite, maybe they don't have I would say the desire to blow a team out. Hey, it's you're celebrating your career at that university. Getting the win's one thing, but, beating a team by 20 points is another thing. And then specifically, a lot of times you get cases, Roy Williams is probably the most famous, where he'll put the walk-ons out there no matter what the talent level for the first couple minutes of the game, then take a timeout and put the regular starters in. But that also happens in other cases. So, you get 3-4 minutes in a first half where you get a lot less talented players that are on the floor for a few minutes. So a lot of times I look to take advantage of big road underdogs, not only betting them for full games, but specifically in the first half plus the points. I think it's more often than not, it's a positive EV bets if you're doing that.
I think I remember an example maybe 2 or 3 years ago when Gary Waters was still at Cleveland State. And he had, I think, 4 seniors, maybe 5, something like that. And a couple of the seniors played like 3 or 4 minutes per game. And he came out right out of the chute and said, I'm starting all my seniors. You know, obviously it's Cleveland State. They're in the Horizon League. They're not a very good team. But he said, I'm starting all my seniors. And I bet against them first half and full game. I think, oddly enough, both bets actually lost. But, you know, again, over the long term, you would think that these guys that don't play a whole lot, they don't play a whole lot for a reason. So if they're out there starting the game, you know, great for them, awesome moment for them, something they'll remember forever, but also a good betting opportunity for us.
Yeah, and I'm not. I mean, of course, you can lose, but I think you know the breakdown makes a lot of sense, and I think if you get enough examples, and maybe it's only 6 or 7 a year. Of course, in a short sample size, you could always have a loser. But if you're looking to bet long term, I think it's something that's been good in the past, and I'll have to dig up some numbers on it and see if there's anything out there in the market. But I personally, I think it's a 55% type of play. Now, it's definitely in the weeds when it's specifically, fading big home favorites, specifically in the first half. I get it. Most of the listeners can't get at that, but I do think it's a long-term 55, maybe even +% type of betting over the long haul. It might not be just this year, but if you're asking, 5, 6 years, how do you take advantage of it? That's how I do it. That's how I've been doing it, and that's how I'm going to continue to do it unless things change moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking here. I went to the team charts page at Bart Torvik's website. We've talked a lot about Bart Torvik this year. I think he is the best, the number one college basketball resource out there. Went to the team charts page for the X-axis and the Y-axis, set it to experience. So you can see the teams that are the most experienced in the country this year. Then you go to their actual team pages, open some new tabs. Then you can see, which teams have a lot of starters, which teams have starters that contribute a lot, which teams maybe have starters that don't, and then maybe look to take advantage of this angle. And one other thing I want to mention here, Brad, we talk about small conferences this weekend. You've got a couple of guys that have scored 3,000 points, and Chris Clemens at Campbell, Mike Daum at South Dakota State, both of them with senior days here this weekend. How do you approach that, where a transcendent, almost once-in-a-generation player is celebrating his senior day? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very emotional. I mean, it's just one guy. Again, that's a tough question. It's going to have to be a case-by-case basis. I guess when I'm looking to fade these senior days, it's just, look, and I should have made this point clear, I'm looking for multiple seniors, not just one. In some of these instances, when you're celebrating the career of, a historical player, not for that university or in that conference, I've seen positives around that where they go for, if they're going for a record. I mean, we saw Kobe in his final game there, light it up. I know it's a horrible example, but put 60-plus points. I mean, if it's just him and we're just dealing with that specific player and it's kind of a celebration about his career, I mean, sometimes it can be a positive because everyone wants to get him the ball, and if he's your best player and he's trying to put on a show in his final home game, again, we're getting even deeper into the weeds here, but I would say in those specific examples, it might even be a positive, and I would be more prone to not fade them, and even in some cases be on that team.
Well, and again, I mean, for our listeners out there, this takes some effort. This takes some work to look up.
Yeah.
But, if you want to try and find those edges, especially at this time of the year in a very tight college basketball betting market, that's what will separate you. That's how you can be somebody who has success with this business, is to put in the time. Obviously, that people like Brad and I do, and all the other guests that we've had on this show. So if you aspire to be like that, it may be a lot of work for 4 or 5 or 6 spots here this season, but those are the types of angles and advantages that you do want to look for.
Yeah, and I mean, if we're going to get specific here, Chris Clemens, their game against Radford's probably going to be a much tighter line than what Daum is at South Dakota State. They're playing Western Illinois. They'll be a double-digit favorite there. So, Clemens is going to have to, get his emotions in check, and we're going to get a line probably closer in the pick'em range. So, for me personally, if we're going to dive specifically into it, I'd be much more likely want to be on the Campbell side in a big time home game against Radford.
Brad Powers, professional handicapper over at BradPowersSports.com. What's going on over there right now, man?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit of football. Again, football newsletter, $69. I'll have my spring football newsletter coming up here in the next week or so. That'll get you all covered as far as spring games go, future odds, bets that I made. My early season power ratings will be posted up there, and a heck of a lot more. $69, not only for the off-season issues. We're talking through next year's Super Bowl, so you get it emailed to you weekly during the season. And again, we're talking 600-plus game sample size over the last 4 years. 57% against the spread every single college football and NFL pick. That's not too shabby. In fact, I think it's like 30 games above the number 2 newsletter in the market. So a great value there. If you're looking for college basketball, it's daily updates. It's VIP service. You get it emailed to you daily all the way through the national championship game in early April. That's 149. Go to BradPowersSports.com.
And you can follow Brad on Twitter at Brad Powers and the number 7. Brad, lots of great discussions here on today's segment. Definitely enjoyed it quite a bit. Enjoy that Arizona State spring game tonight, man, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, sounds good, my friend. Take care.